Unfiltered. Like you're in another world, like you zoned out.
Hello and welcome back to Unfiltered. I'm your host, Georgii Speakman, and this week we are shedding light on Nicole Gibson, a visionary entrepreneur currently serving as the CEO of inTruth Technologies. She's generated 15 years of incredible experience in scaling companies and informing policy. She's also dedicated her career to revolutionizing the way humanity understands and manages emotions. And we all need this, guys, let's face it. Former federal mental health commissioner in Australia, she is now pioneering the world's first biometric emotion tracking technology. So, under her leadership, inTruth is redefining not only the wearable technology market with proprietary machine learning models and sovereign data infrastructure, aiming to capture over a $500 billion opportunity in emotional health and human performance. So I'm delighted to welcome you to the show, Nicole. I am even more excited that you're a fellow Australian. Lucky me that I get to interview all these kick-ass Australian women.
Thank you, Georgie. What a pleasure. And amen. We need more Aussies taking over the US, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Your work is just incredible, so impressive. I just want to congratulate you on your journey so far. You've been harnessing a career and life between Australia and the States. I believe that you're somewhat currently based these days in San Francisco, but you're otherwise currently in Sydney.
That's right. Yeah. Actually on the Gold Coast today, but the team are in Sydney. Yeah.
Lovely. How have you been finding the cultural differences in business between Australia and the US? I imagine that you've noticed that there's quite a difference between traditional, corporate or government-based Australian business and where it's conducted, the way people think and operate versus like a Silicon Valley.
Yeah. I mean, I could go on script and say what I'm assuming every other guest has said, which is there's the obvious difference in risk appetite and the aggressive approach, to business, which I think for any founder that reaches a certain point in Australia and wants to grow, I think you hit the same feeling, that ceiling of like, oh wow, I feel like I can't actually expand in the way that I want to. Which obviously it contributes to the brain drain, and I'm very passionate about that because I think Australia has so many things that it could be using to attract innovators and entrepreneurial talent, and it's a work in progress, I'd say. I think that there's some, I won't say that they're doing nothing, but yeah, I think beyond that, totally candidly, I struggle a lot with American culture, like in the true sense. I have a very dry British sense of humor, which is constantly misunderstood.
Misunderstood?
Yeah.
Trust me, I know.
Yeah.
Trust me.
And interpreted as like mean or, and you're just trying to have a banter.
Yeah.
So I've made a lot of friends with Russians. I've made a lot of friends with Europeans. And
Yeah.
That since being in San Francisco.
For sure. Well, that's awesome to hear. And no doubt other races, cultures, and nationalities too. But I can't tell you, especially in the earlier days where I was just being a typical Aussie, I've had stares, like people get, abominably upset, completely taking something the wrong way. And you kind of have to say, oh, I'm like, is it the quickest thing to say to explain is, oh, I'm Australian. We like have a different, it's banter, but they still look at you sideways because they, fervently believe you've said something deliberately offensive. So
exactly, yeah. But luckily, if you have a good relationship with yourself, it can actually add to how humorous the situation becomes.
Yeah, I remember a girlfriend, an Adelaide girlfriend of mine. She's really quite, the tall poppy syndrome thing. You know how part of our sense of humor is a lot of self-deprecation. Like we'll give each other a lot of shit, but we'll put ourselves down a lot. But it's like part of the humor and all that. Every time that she would say things in that vein, in like a humorous way, the Americans would go, "Oh my God, babe, do you need to see someone? Like, are you okay? Do you need help?" I mean, she probably did need help, does need help, but like, still, it's just
we all
like,
need some form of help, Georgie. It's better to laugh at it, I think. Yeah.
yes, And that just, I mean, a million questions naturally for you today. Delighted and do a shout out to Steven Salzberg
Go
in
Steven.
New York. I've known Steven for God, like over 15 years now, for connecting
Oh,
us, and so great excuse to have a really fruitful chat with you. But you know, one of your, I mean, there's lots of great content that you naturally have on your social channels and all the rest are part of your personal brand and naturally inTruth's brand. But you are very proactive in speaking about the dichotomous nature and the two sides of the coin being love and fear. And I just wanted to share how much I connected with this and support this notion. I'm going to just be transparent and share with you when I was going through a really, really, really tough time when around 19 years of age, I finally read Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. And
amazing
I
book.
read it in like 2 or 3 days, but that was the first like proper book back in the day. And obviously a lot older now, that actually spoke about the difference between love and fear and how love is of the heart. It's your highest, side of self and form, and ego or fear is largely the mind. And how it's a constant battle to move from either place, but you have to recognize where you're moving from. And all negative emotions come from fear, obviously, or positive emotions come from a place of love. And then further, and I don't mean to ramble because this interview is all about, or this conversation is all about you, but I do have to share this with you because it is uncanny.
Yeah.
In my chapter, we wrote a book called The AI Revolution recently that ended up being a co-authored international bestseller. But the majority
Congratulations.
of my chapter is actually talking about how I was talk about how AI is very much actually a personal journey, and how if we actually move from a place of love and not fear, because there's so much trepidation and fear around AI, what's it going to do to my job, my future, my everything, my life, my identity. But if you actually come back to love and realize there are so many positivities, and we're in a constant state of evolution, that's part of the spiritual journey, all these different things. And I really talk about the parallels of love and fear. So when I'm doing a deep dive into you, I'm just like, my God, I can't wait to talk to this woman because she is really capturing such an important and poignant, I don't even want to say, it's not even a market, it's a way of being. I mean, to your point, it's the extension of humanity. It's managing the way humans manage their emotions and their relationship to life, themselves, and the world around them.
Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, it's a philosophy, I think, and a state. I think so much of our world is driven by, whether consciously or largely unconsciously, I think would probably both agree, in a pursuit to find love, find
Mhm.
love through success, power, even, the pursuit of things like exploitation and manipulation. You could actually trace it back to someone trying to feel a sense of, lovelessness inside
Mhm.
of them. And if we could find a place or arrive at a place where that just becomes the default, my imagination just goes crazy thinking about what we can create from that place. And you know, I've had a pretty colorful journey, and been in all kinds of different rooms, and you see that that's true for, someone living in a remote community in Australia, or it's true for someone in, a penthouse in Manhattan in New York. At every level of life, it's true. And I think we're crying out to find something that can unify us in solidarity because of how polarized the world has become, and the brokenness I think each person feels as a result of that.
What is your opinion on this? You kind of just touched on it, but it does feel that parallel to access to information, spiritual and self development and help, access to all the information through social media, at the same juncture, there seems to be as much of obviously an equal negative impact that the likes of social media, etc., is having on humanity. I mean, it's also impacted by a range of things. The world's changed a bit since COVID. The world has
Mm.
significantly changed since social media came into play. And even though, once again, and this is not a new conversation, but it does tie into what you're doing, which is the purpose of social media was to unite communities all around the world and have access to friends and families in other corners of the globe and all the things. But at the same time, there's the addiction component. There's obviously multiple reports of it causing depression and just emotional instability and mental health issues and all the things in it as part of that addiction. So we're becoming even more separate in many sense, as much as we are connected. So what's your take on that holistically?
I mean, I completely agree. I think we are so far removed from our primal origin, which is to be in connection, with each other. And if you study, like in physical connection with each other in tribes, in communities, when you study the human hormonal system, it's wired for that. We release serotonin and oxytocin when we're in proximity to people, when we receive someone through a sense of kinship. It triggers these hormones that are actually crucial for our well-being and survival, actually, because Homo sapiens were not the strongest or fastest animal. So it was this like default in us to connect and to love and to receive each other as family that allowed us to actually evolve through working together. And if you look at how a lot of these platforms are designed, it is nefarious, actually, because it's designed to chase someone down to the root of their brain and into their autonomic nervous system and actually manipulate these hormones and these chemicals inside of us. Brands have done this even pre-social media. We replaced the feeling of serotonin when someone we loved did something that made us proud with a designer brand that gave us that feeling of, oh, I'm being noticed because I'm wearing this brand. Like that's a manipulation of this primitive system that's being played continuously against us. And this is what's creating, this sense of intense addiction, to the point that, we have quantum entanglements with our phone. Our system actually will feel when our phone's going off in the other room, even if we don't hear it. We are literally entangled with our technology to the point it's taking us away from presence. And we've got to rethink this. In our team, we talk a lot about when we're communicating about inTruth, because it's a common question that we get around, well, what's to stop someone from developing an addiction to a technology like yours to emotionally regulate, which is kind of very anti the principles in which we're designing inTruth with. We talk about the fact that the technology curve has happened so fast the last decade or so, that no one has practiced, a sense of awareness around boundaries at all. Like we knew probably after we set a couple of things on fire, after the sort of the discovery of fire, I was going to say the invention, but more the discovery of fire, we recognized that there was a positive way to use fire and there was a destructive way to use fire. But we haven't had that same grace period. And on top of that, we were existing in a capitalist system, which is driven almost exclusively by profit, where founders and CEOs are shackled to their shareholders and they have to act in the shareholders' best interest, which could also mean the demise of humanity. And we're not stopping to actually think twice, and I think that does take solidarity. It takes enough people waking up and asking, well, actually, this is the earth that I live on. This is the earth that my children are going to live on, that my grandchildren are going to live on. And I should have a say in this. I want to have deeper conversations around what this should actually mean. But instead, I think we have younger generations, millennials included, that are actually not even interested in having kids. Like we've gone the other way. We've gone like in an existentialist, extinctionist direction, I think, because so many people feel a sense of hopelessness.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, we can all relate to that at different times and moments, for sure. You touched on it, the evolution of technology. I mean, it's obviously, and particularly with AI, we're going to see continued rapid development more in the next few years than we have in obviously the last century, which is insane to think that with these lack of boundaries that you just mentioned, obviously inTruth is going to be part of the solution, part of the solution. But what's your advice on how businesses and human beings, individuals, anyone, everybody, entrepreneurs can start thinking about creating these healthier boundaries, or like even tapping back into their sense of self, so they're not losing that connect as they're going full steam ahead, light years ahead with technology, particularly now, and you're utilizing AI, obviously. So how do you talk about and speak to that relationship in the very work? It's almost like a somewhat of a juxtaposition ish,
Yeah. I
so
mean, depending on how you're using it, I think
yeah.
these are incredible technologies, actually, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
completely pro technological evolution.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge that I think we need to be aware of is, are you using technology in a way that's actually damaging your own cognitive abilities? I'll give a really practical example. I wrote my first book when I was 24, 25, and I used to be able to sit and write for probably 6-7 hours uninterrupted. I
Mm-hmm.
wrote my second book a couple of years ago, sitting right here, Legacy Disorder.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you, and likewise. And I noticed, that when I went to write Legacy Disorder, I would start hitting a wall at like 2 or 3 hours of sitting and writing, and I'd get distracted. I'd start thinking about the things. I wanted to check my phone. And it was
Mm-hmm.
this really like huge wake up call for me where I was like, oh my God, like writing is my art form.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is worth, no amount of outsourcing or efficiency. Like I should not be prioritizing efficiency over my expression, something that brings me a lot of deep fulfillment. I shouldn't be okay with outsourcing my writing to such a degree that I actually now struggle to sit and write for long periods of time, which is something I've done since I was very, very, very young. So in that moment of awareness, I hit that recognition, right? That no, actually, this is more important to me. So yes, I'll use, some level of outsourcing with communications in a way that, it's not really affecting my ability to actually write. That could be sending a couple sentence, email. But when it comes to like really things that are very meaningful to me, I want to maintain my discipline of actually sitting and writing in my own voice and not outsourcing that. Now that's sort of a very kind of personal example, but what I think is happening is any generation younger than millennials, like the Gen Z and Alpha Gen, never had the ability to even develop that. So people
Mm-hmm.
like you and I have a reference point.
Yeah,
We have a
absolutely.
time where we can be like, oh my God, I used to be able to do that. And now that attention span's waning. But we're not even giving younger generations the opportunity to fully develop their cognitive capabilities. And that to me is very concerning. Like these technologies should be
Yes.
life enhancing.
Mm-hmm.
They shouldn't actually be compromising us because unfortunately, as the CEO of a tech company, I see the worst and I know how to think in nefarious ways, even though I'd never choose it because you're just exposed to the way the industry thinks.
Mm-hmm.
If you create that level of deficiency in younger generations, underdeveloped cognitive abilities, underdeveloped personalities because they can't interact or socialize or regulate their emotions or handle any kind of conflict, that is ripe to be able to sell them literally anything.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we talk about at inTruth is like one of our lines is technologies that actually invade the physiology. So something like a brain computer interface that permanently merges the human consciousness, the human mind with AI. That is a complete line for us because in that moment of choice at mass scale, I think that there's something to be said maybe for someone that is a paraplegic, but even then there's kind of a spiritual perspective that I tend to lean towards. Maybe a conversation for another time. When you're interfering with organic life in such a radical way, I think there will be a consequence that is
Mm-hmm.
unavoidable. But I believe in God. I believe in the soul's evolution. So that's my
Yeah,
personal perspective.
absolutely.
I don't think we can shortcut the evolution that's required on the level of the soul, no matter how much we want to play God. But at mass scale, in making choices like to merge with a BCI, basically what you're doing is just admitting or surrendering what it really means to be a biological organic human being. And we're
Mm-hmm.
accepting a complete rewiring of our evolutionary trajectory. And, there might be the majority of the world that are happy with that. But I think many will end up facing that choice without even contemplating what it
Right.
actually means. And that to me is a tragedy.
Oof, I feel you. I feel you. I just caved and got an Apple Watch this week. Because there was some offer through my internet provider. I
Well
was like,
timed, no doubt.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's sitting here. It's not on my wrist, but I put it on, and I was like, wait, I can feel this tingling down into my hands and up my arm, and I was like, this can't not be emitting not only radiation, sorry, Apple, radiation, but then also just completely throwing your chakra system out of whack, and your meridian system out of whack.
Mm,
What is your take on that? Because you looking at launching wearable tech and
mhm,
changing the face of that. I love the Apple Watch, but I can't help but think, is this throwing me energetically, and to your point,
mm.
when you're talking about organic human state and all the rest, what's that going to be doing to us when we become more and more integrated from that wearable standpoint and, yeah, codependent on technology like that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Look, I think like sensor-based technology, if designed in the right way, without the constant EMF, um, could actually be incredible because what it's doing is enhancing our sensory capacity without distracting us with a screen. You know, the issue I think with something like an Apple Watch is the screen is constantly taking your attention, right?
Hmm.
But if you have a technology that is tracking your biometrics but isn't invasive in any way, and there's a consideration of how frequently the Bluetooth is connected, say, to your phone, which is then emitting EMF, or on the Apple Watch, it's actually cellular, so it literally is cellular EMF. But there's ways of designing technologies that don't go down that route, and if you do that successfully, what you end up with is a complete window into your inner world. One of the
Hmm.
things that, and it allows people to become their own doctor, their own therapist, their own coach. And I believe, I have an extensive career background in mental health and health advocacy. And what the number one thing that I've seen that disempowers people the most is a lack of agency when it comes to their health journey, a lack of agency over their mind, a lack of agency over their emotional state. So that would look
Yep.
like making choices that they don't feel in control of, having thoughts that they don't feel in control of, having a physical issue that's limiting their ability to have agency and live the life that they want. Um, and to be able to reinstate a sense of agency and choice is the most radical sort of up leveling you can provide someone, I believe, when it comes to their health. And technologies, if designed appropriately, will provide this to the world.
I could
But
have
we've
used, go
yeah,
on, sorry. Finish what
that
you were
yeah
saying.
that was basically my point. Yeah.
Well, talking about, uh, I guess, uncontrollable feelings, I had a mini meltdown on Sunday. I occasionally get my little Sunday, sadness, my Sunday depression, and it's because um, I'm single. I don't have any family in the country whatsoever. Time zones are difficult. The South is very Bible beltish, so a lot of people are in church and doing brunches and lunches with their families and doing cookouts at the house or watching sport games at the house. I don't really follow the whole football thing in America, so I'm not I'm not at the pub glued to a screen, and so I often find myself, if I'm not spending time with friends or in nature, obviously by myself, but feeling quite lonely. And in those moments, it's sometimes hard to regulate because I'm like, I'm just a human being, and I'm simply just a little girl inside, still in my well and truly into my adult life that is craving community. And don't get me wrong, I've got great friends and all the things, but there's something, it's not the same as sort of having like close family or the friends that have known you for 20, 30 years plus, and all that kind of stuff. So I think in moments, I know that a lot of people, particularly in today's society with so many different things, people losing their jobs, the political climate feeling like a threat to a lot of people. There are a whole range of different issues that are isolating people. from themselves, from their community. And so I imagine, like, obviously inTruth's purpose is going to help bridge a lot of that gap.
Yeah. Well, I think part of what has contributed to this breakdown of community, and I just want to acknowledge, what you just shared, and just take a minute and not skip over it, because what you're speaking to, I know so many people feel. Actually, statistically, 80% of the world, 80% of the Western world report feeling lonely.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I think when you're capable and you're charismatic and you're social, these things there can be like a sense of shame in feeling these things. And the reason I want to pause on that and really speak to it is because this is really by design. This is not a lack of someone's ability to connect or make friends or love.
Right.
Or
100%.
This is the way that we've constructed society, especially, in a country like America. Like, you could argue that Australia is a bit more of a socialist country in this sense.
It
But
is,
America
yeah.
is extremely capitalist and very individualistic.
Yeah.
And it's about, you. And so it creates a collective mindset. Like, when you go to Europe, go to, one of my favorite parts of the world is the Amalfi Coast, or places like Sardinia. And you go in the summer, and at 11 o'clock at night, you have 3-4 generations sitting on the street with their communities, playing backgammon, eating food, drinking wine.
Yeah.
Like, this is how we're meant to live. And I mean, we could really spend 2 hours just analyzing this, because part of it is how we've constructed our economics. The other is, like, as the world has evolved, and people that are maybe of British descent or European descent are then living in a country like Australia, as an example. There's obviously a million examples of this. You're then disconnected from your cultural heritage and your cultural set of values and your cultural traditions and your cultural practices, and we haven't replaced it with anything. And then you add the way that we've constructed economics and inflation and cost of living, and then all of that stress that's compounding. We're basically completely displaced as a species.
100%.
Yeah. But none of us are able to reflect on these things, so we internalize it and we think it's our fault.
Correct. And as you're sharing this and talking about cultural heritage, I can hear the kookaburras in the background, and that's just making me feel just that, special Aussie touch,
It is,
good old
yeah.
cookies.
I love those bird sounds.
Yeah. And, talking about America, and obviously I live here, so I've been here for 12 years. I do love America. I do think it's an amazing country in so many ways. I think it has a tremendous amounts to offer on so many levels. But the darker side of it is that individualistic, capitalistic nature, where it does create separation and competition. But further, as an immigrant, I just know that the second I started the intense immigration journey, it turned me into what made me feel like a product, where you had to pitch yourself, present yourself, you had to meet all the criteria, you had to put a label on yourself. Everything was like programmed, and it just felt very, and you sort of go on this crazy journey, particularly in a city like LA, where you're operating in certain industries.
It is so hard. Like, basic shit is hard. Like, like even not even that long ago, I had been waiting in line at the DMV for like 6 hours. Like, I think longer. Maybe
been there.
Maybe 7 hours, and always you get there and the guy's like, okay, you got this form, you don't have your I-94
have that one.
Never heard of in my life, right?
Yep.
So I was like, what the
Where
hell
do
is
I
an
get that from?
Yeah. And then he's like, oh, you can do this, and I call my partner when I'm still at the plastic desk, place, and I'm like, please try to find this form. She finds it for me and sends it to me, and I'm like, okay, I've got the I-94 form, and he's like, no, you've got to print it. And there's like 10 printers sitting behind him. I'm like, please just print this for me. And I started to really I started to really feel like this rage, because I just I had to take the day off work, like this uncontrollable rage. And I left it. He didn't do it for me, so I had to go back. And I called my girlfriend in the car park. I was just screaming. I was like, It's like, this would
Mm-hmm.
never happen in any other country.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how?
Mm-hmm.
And just those moments of just like, when you're not familiar with the system, or you've come from
Oh,
a country that's actually a lot more sort of coordinated and small population, and then you're thrown into like that sort of environment with no support network. I mean, I'm blessed now that I have a partner, but my first few years in the States, like, yeah, it was me. Like,
yep.
and it was so fucking hard,
It's
and
so hard.
it's like every level of survival is just under threat.
It is. I cannot even tell you how much I relate. I mean, I am so I was so intensely passionate about the I guess the falsities or the misrepresentation of the American dream that I wrote a bloody book about it. Like I literally talk. I mean, the DMV gets mentioned in the book. I talk about the insane bureaucratic processes. Ju- I've been there,
Like,
like lining up.
thinking when I was in that, I was like, oh my God, like I'm a white English speaking Australian. How the hell does
Is
a
everyone else doing it?
non-English speaking immigrant, like, people have no idea like
Mm-hmm.
what those people must go through
Yeah.
to just survive in a
Yep.
country like America, like to not have
100%.
access to a printer, to not have proper
Yep.
documentation, like to validate your fucking address at a bank in America, you need
Yep.
like 20
Oh,
points
right.
of proof.
Yep.
Like,
To get Social Security, you need a home address, but you can't get a home address or get like a rental agreement unless you're paying 12 months rent up
without an
front,
SSN.
unless
Yeah.
you got, a credit card in a bank, but you can't get a credit card without the Social Security. You're like, oh my God, it is an absolute rabbit warren of discombobulation. It's wild. And you won't, no one will ever understand it until they go through it. But it's funny. And then you've got to adapt culturally to the different cities, and that's why I ask, because the culture of LA is so different to say where I'm living now in Atlanta versus the San Frans of the world and all that kind of stuff. So I'm sure that has definitely been a fun challenge and wonderful sort of ecosystem to have to navigate. But I want to
Yeah.
I want to rewind a little bit and just sort of, are you born and raised Sydney?
No, so I was born actually on the Gold Coast, and
Okay.
I spent a lot of my childhood actually in London,
Okay.
but would come back and forth a lot. So our family was mum and dad had a place in Brisbane and also on the Gold Coast, and then in London. And my brothers are a lot older than me. They're like 11 and 8 years older.
Mm-hmm.
So, they were pretty much grown up, and dad wanted to stay for work in the UK. And mum wanted, to be back here. So for me, that meant sort of basically 6 months in both places for a very long time.
Unreal.
Different schools every year. And I think,
Wow.
looking back, but both feel equally like home. Like when I fly into Heathrow, I get a very similar feeling of home as to when I fly into, Brisbane Airport or Sydney
Wow.
Airport.
That's
And I think
unreal.
that's, when you have young years in places, it creates that connection to the place. And I've lived in London as an adult multiple times, and I love it. The weather does get to me in cold months, but I love London a lot. And it's to that sense a big city, but I know how to navigate the city. And I think moving to a city you have no idea what anything is and you're learning it from scratch, it's a whole other story,
That's right.
right?
It is.
Yeah.
Astronomically so.
Yeah.
I think for the first several months of LA, I would drive around all weekend at night, all day, I mean, when I wasn't, obviously when I was working, but like after hours, just to get to know the city inside out, back to front. I now know LA from the north, south, east, west, just like inside out, back to front. But it took a minute, but I wanted to get my bearings. I think that helps when you're navigating a city. The quicker you can get to know it, the safer you kind of like feel. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
I'm so fascinated by the fact that you work for the government in the mental health space. Tell me a little bit about that journey into that space, because you seem like a bit of an outlier, a bit of a renegade, and I know that those environments can be quite different and contrived in their own way. What was that whole journey and experience like for all those years? And what was the pivotal moment that really catapulted you into the journey of entrepreneurship?
You know, I it was a big journey. Um, it was a journey that actually started with a nonprofit I founded in when I was 18. So really no intent to ever work in government, and I think that that's why I had such a unique experience actually, because I was asked by Tony Abbott's administration, who was prime minister at the time, to serve as a federal commissioner when I was 20 years old.
That's
And
unbelievable.
the youngest commissioner before me, I think, was probably in their 50s or 60s, because usually
Oof.
commissioners get asked the role of a commissioner, or at least the mental health commission, which I served on, is basically to use your network and your professional experience to put forward recommendations on how to spend the federal budget. And my background before that is basically starting a nonprofit at 18 years old, because I recognized that there are a lot of gaps in the mental health care system that I believed could be solved through community, ironic to what we're talking about, and why it's a conversation that's very meaningful to me. But this was this kind of radical idea. We're going back almost 15 years, right? That by developing communities and helping communities with what at the time what I was calling emotional infrastructure. So kind of like the analog version of what inTruth is doing, which is actual emotional infrastructure using technology. I was breaking this down more in a set of skills, conflict resolution skills, learning how to have difficult conversations and support someone through active listening, very basic skills that were just, never taught, essentially, especially in regional and rural parts of Australia that had really high rates of suicide, especially drought affected farming areas. And so I would spend a lot of my time going to those communities and actually living in those communities and helping them build these skills. I had a theatre background. I left school at 14 to pursue theatre. So a lot of where my inspiration had come from was basically what I'd learned in theatre, which was a pretty deep journey into the human condition and what it means to like express yourself and be seen and be vulnerable. I was teaching a lot of those skills to communities and then measuring that against mental health outcomes. And lo and behold, it had very, very powerful effect on things like attendance in school, lowered rates of suicide, lowered rates of admissions to hospitals due to things like drug addiction. And I was just blown away by this, that I started to advocate. And I founded the Parliamentary Friends of Youth Mental Health, when I was 20, after doing this advocacy work for 2 years. And basically, it was the perfect kind of set of synchronicities that allowed government at that level to sort of gain visibility over the work that I was doing. But I think what captured them was this idea that there were more cost-effective ways, go figure, kindness and compassion, of solving what was becoming very economically expensive. And so when I came onto the commission, my job was to look at how we could redirect budget to prevention and early intervention, and do that through community capacity building, which was very different perspective to the other commissioners and most other professionals in the space at the time, who mostly had been kind of practicing psychiatrists. And the news like headline when I was appointed was person with lived experience appointed onto the mental health commission. And it just fucking blows my mind, Georgie, that this was like wild news, someone that had a lived experience, because I'd gone through treatment for anorexia when I was a teenager. And that someone who had a lived experience of mental illness could serve on the mental health commission, which, through anyone that's experienced mental health, you can't understand it unless you've been there. So would that not be sort of obvious that you should be consulting people that have been there, but the mindset truly was, if you've experienced a mental illness, that disqualifies you from having a perspective on the mental health space. And so this was like, wild news. And I received a lot of hate. I also received a lot of love. Like, I became a voice for people that had lived it. And there's a movement now which is very big, especially in Australia, the consumer movement inside mental health, which is, in some cases, people with lived experience are actually mandated to work for a lot of these mental health agencies, so that they're forced to consult someone who's actually been a consumer of the healthcare system. I like to think that I was really a big part of leading that movement forward. And, it was a very scary thing to do, to talk about this back then. No one wanted to talk about it. And, a lot of resistance, a lot of resistance, but it also got to give me some visibility around, people think that governments don't have budgets for these things. They have huge budgets, like tens and tens and tens of billions of dollars, even in a small country like Australia, go into mental health. But it's all reactive. It's waiting till someone has attempted suicide or has a full-blown drug addiction before any intervention happens. We need solutions that fit on the other side of the spectrum, early intervention. Before it's even a problem, we should be teaching people how to handle and manage life. And in my opinion, it shouldn't really be called mental health support necessarily, because it's just, the core of it, it's life skills.
This is human. Yeah,
it's just human life skills that none of us ever learned for whatever reason.
I know. The systems, it's all largely backwards. So you really have been an incredible pioneer in the space for a very long time. I'm very curious to know what stage in your career that you started really considering the entrepreneurial journey, and you sort of was inTruth the idea that you had sort of from inception as a part of this realization, or it was a bit of a journey and process, over time?
Yeah, definitely, like, inTruth as it is now was not there, but there was, I believe, one tension that I was trying to reconcile through my entire career that led me down this path, which was because, think about the paradox of these experiences I was having professionally. Like, communities would call me and say, "Hey, Nick, can you come and live in my mining town for a month?" Like, I was literally running mental health workshops with miners at 4 a.m. before they went into the mines, in the mine. Like, I was like, roll up my sleeves, like, 18-year-old girl in this environment, like, could not have been more involved, right? And then seeing the top level of how budget's spent in Canberra, having dinner with the Prime Minister, and the paradox of those experiences drilled into me very, very deeply that we need scalable solutions that don't compromise personalization. Because what I would see in the system was people at the highest level that had a lot of authority to distribute significant amounts of funding from the top down, that there was no personalization. They didn't understand the pain of the people they were making decisions for. And then there were the people on the ground, the people like, me and community groups, or even the FIFO psychologists, that would only spend half a day in those communities because they had 20 other communities they had to visit, that deeply understood the personal pain, but there was no scale.
Right.
And that used to agonize me, because I was like, why is this so fragmented? There's got to be a way that we can build a solution that's truly personal, but has scale. And, that wasn't a service-oriented model. And I started to realize that. And actually, like, I had two contemplations when I left the commission. In my final term, I wrote my first book, and I started to experience scale at that point in my journey, but more through, I was being invited to speak on big stages around the world, and I had books and content, digital content that people would engage with. And I was like, wow, my content has the ability to touch hundreds, thousands, or millions of people. That's scale. Like, but then I knew that I was a finite resource, so it still wasn't true scale. Like, in 2 generations' time, can this really change a system? And the answer was no, and I wanted to achieve that. So I was pushing towards more scale. And actually I got to one of 2 options. The first was actually music. Like, I considered going full-time into music and creating like a category of music that could really like define a new genre. And I actually might do that. That's probably going to be my next pursuit, because that's one of my passions on the side of building this company. And the other was tech. What if we could actually build an infrastructure a true infrastructure that made this tangible, that made this data source visible, and made it impossible for every industry to ignore. And it was that idea that started to drive my journey with inTruth.
Woo! I feel like I need 10 podcast interview slots with you to just navigate the amount I want to unpack with you. And we will do that. I'm for sure going to be having follow-up conversations with you, and of course off camera, offline too. But I just want to say congratulations to you, and like, it is just so outstandingly impressive all that you've accomplished. I mean, you were basically in there, you know, completely spearheading change at the most authentic, genuine levels from almost the day that you legally possibly could. So it is just, I mean, the whole world needs to know about you and your presence and what you're up to. Um, I'm curious, naturally, as an advocate of AI. I did a little AI certificate with Berkeley a couple of years ago. You know, blah, blah, blah. How did you reconcile, when did your like interest, acknowledgement of AI sort of commence? Did you sort of within truth parallel to that go obviously with innovation and future tech? It's obviously going to be AI driven. Tell me more about that journey and how you really sort of immersed yourself in AI, and how that's truly integrated within truth, what it's doing, how it's moving, functioning, all the things.
Yeah, you know, I actually started inTruth before like the AI boom. And it was really I started inTruth at the end of 2020. And so let's say like the launch of ChatGPT was the first time that consumers really started to have a
Like,
way,
yeah, ding dong, yeah.
you know, of building like ChatGPT, in my opinion, is kind of like an AWS for AI. Like you can build custom GPTs, and it's become a plugin and an infrastructure that many other companies have built on. So it created a level of access similar to like the App Store or AWS or Google Cloud that brought this into the mainstream. And that happened in, you know, late 2022. So I was already a couple years into my journey by that point. And I think, you know, it was actually amazing timing, because what the conversation around AI has enabled us to do is position ourselves in this really strong way. But I would argue that most category leaders in the machine learning and AI space were working on this LLMs, pre-launch of LLMs.
Yeah.
And that has now accelerated. And I also think like AI is obviously a very general term that a lot of people use, and we do use a version of AI, but we use basically advanced machine learning in our technology. We don't use LLMs in our technology. So what our technology is actually doing is pulling raw data from wearables and translating that through a machine learning model. And the machine learning model has been trained off data that we've actually collected in a lab, where basically we expose people to emotionally provocative situations. We capture their biometric data, and that data is then training the AI model or the machine learning model to be able to delineate distinct emotion. And so we have a way of actually reading emotion objectively through doing that. So it's untraditional in the sense that we're applying machine learning and machine learning algorithms in a very novel way that no one else is doing. But it has nothing to do with, you know, Claude or ChatGPT. We're applying it in a very kind of unique way in the biometric space. And of course, like advances and speed of technology, even the ability to sort of generate code bases, all of these things have like wildly accelerated our roadmap. And I think this is an appropriate use of technological advancement. If we can drive innovation that's truly going to make differences, like the
Absolutely.
application for artificial intelligence in healthcare, to me, is probably the most exciting. Like, obviously, because
Yes.
I'm working, but generally,
Yeah,
I think this will be the way that we solve
that's right.
most disease. Yeah.
Yeah. Very, yeah, super incredible. So I mean, big difference once again from even, you know, the corporate world or, you know, government working in that space into the world of entrepreneurship. What has been your actual journey as a founder and entrepreneur in like getting this company set up, putting business plans and strategies together, finding investors, all the things? Because obviously, as we're entering more and more of the DIY space, there's a proliferation of the way people are, multi-hyphenate creators and people with, the gig economy and all the rest. We're seeing obviously more and more entrepreneurs and founders or intrapreneurs now than ever before. And it's obviously going to continue to happen, and particularly when, I hate to say it, but as AI continues to evolve and a lot of people end up losing their jobs, there's job cuts from that top down at the corporate level. What was the journey into entrepreneurship like for you? How did you go about it? Talk to all of that, because it's a big one and it's a really important one, and more people are curious by it. But it's astounding to me as to how few people actually have the skills to truly run a startup business. It's 1,000 times tougher than what it looks.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're asking, I would say the right questions, because I think too many entrepreneurs just talk about the wins, right? Oh, I raised this much capital. And if you spent like a little bit of time on my Instagram, you'd probably notice like I talk about founders' mental health a lot, because I think obviously I have a mental health background and now I'm a founder, but I think it's totally underrepresented. Like, the post I put up, I want to get the stats right. This was a post that I wrote just the other day. So Horizon Research Survey polled 258 local startup founders in Silicon Valley, showed 91% of those startup founders were impacted by their mental health. 70% had anxiety, 57% had sleep issues, 55% experienced burnout, 31% depression, and 49% experienced or witnessed inappropriate behavior, including bullying, sexual harassment, or predatory behavior. And
experienced it all, honey. Seen it all.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah.
I mean, same. I could tell a million stories, and I think founders, and actually the report went on to say, others reported loneliness, more often than not, founders did nothing about it because they said it would have a negative impact. Others reported loneliness, irritability, mood swings, marriage and family problems, panic attacks, and substance abuse. So
1,000%.
The way that the thing that really hits me about that is most didn't report it because they believed that it would have a negative impact on their ability to succeed as an entrepreneur. And the compounding impact, I mean, you're female, so like let's talk on that level, because I think it's really underrepresented. Less than 1% of venture capital goes to female entrepreneurs. And usually the next question I get is, oh, well, maybe it's a disproportionate ratio of women to men that are pitching. It's not. It's like a 60-40 ratio of women that will try to get their first capital raise done compared to their male counterpart. So, there's some discrepancy, but it should not be 0.8% of all venture going to women in the States. And even it's like not that much better in Australia. I think it's 2%. So when you have all of those compounding stresses as a founder, and then I like to sort of compare it to, being an entrepreneur, or specifically a startup founder of a tech startup, it's like being an athlete, except your coaches, i.e. your investors, rather than having scheduled recovery and encouraging that, they just push you harder. Now imagine being an Olympic athlete and having no scheduled recovery. That's basically, and then the more the more you rise, the more you rise to power. There's this other really complex thing, and this is actually what I wrote my second book about, is the more you rise to power, the less of an empathy bandwidth people have for you.
Oh my God.
So then you're the most vulnerable you've ever been. You have the most responsibility with the least amount of rest, and you have the least amount of access to empathy.
Right.
And I believe this is what turns a lot of leaders into crazy psychotic leaders, because
psychopaths.
Those dynamics don't, like, the level of patience and self-awareness you need to cultivate in order to keep an open heart in amongst all of that is, not impossible, but near impossible for the average person that doesn't have practices that would support, that. My personal journey, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to put words to just how hard it truly is, but I try to. I try to, because I think it's misrepresented too much. And I don't actually think every person should try to be a founder. I think it's a very unique personality. And, a lot of those personality traits the ability to handle huge amounts of risk. You've got to be slightly mad. You basically live in the future and you ignore reality as it stands. Like I shared a little bit on my childhood. I basically lived in a different place every year, huge amounts of international travel. My father's a professional gambler, very successful professional gambler.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the arts and I went through a mental illness. So it was all a severe mental illness that almost killed me. It was the accumulation of all of these experiences that I believe primed me to be able to do this.
Yep. Likewise, I can relate for sure.
Because I know what. Yeah.
Oh, you go.
You go.
I was gonna say, I can see now why Stephen put us together, because there are so many synergies here. It's not funny. I want you to finish what you were saying, and I'll share.
Okay, cool. For you see then. Yeah, but it's, it would, and it does. Like, I can't tell you, Georgie, how many female founders reach out to me and say, I think I don't know what to do. I'm experiencing sexual harassment, or I'm being treated differently.
Yep.
So, I experienced it recently. Like, I was invited to come and talk about my business and an investment, and was, tried to be kissed and rejected it, and tried to kiss me again, and you just sit there and you're like, this would never happen if I was a man. So why is this happening to me?
Dude.
And the level of entitlement is just astonishing.
It is.
These are hard conversations, right? They're hard conversations, but they're conversations that we need to have. And my partner and I talk about, it a lot, because I've never kind of really openly talked about my sexuality, because I think it's like the least interesting thing about me, to be honest. Like, there's so many other things but I do think it gives me a pretty interesting lens. Like, my sexuality, plus the fact that I'm a female founder in this world, which is like very male driven and very kind of traditional heteronormative like frames. I can just see it all in this way that I feel like very few people can.
Yep.
And I do want to use my voice, like, where it can make a difference, to bring light to this and awareness to this, because, at the end of the day, I don't really give a fuck about any of that on this rudimentary level. Like I said, I think these things should be the least interesting things about people, but I do care about diversity as it relates to technology design. That's what I actually care about, because if we have 98% of all of our technologies being built by like Ivy League dropout tech bros in the late 20s and early 30s, we have like basically the most unrelatable demographic that is defining the next 1,000 years of like human evolution. And unless we make space and start to challenge these things, and like I was asked about this, I gave a talk to a bunch of youth advocates the other day, and some of them were women, and they asked, like, what's it like being a female CEO? And I like sat there, I was like, should I say the diplomatic thing, or should I just speak candidly? And I was like, I'm going to speak candidly. Like, it's really, really hard.
It is
often, and often when you address it or you talk about it, people will think you're a bitch.
Yep.
And you have to weigh up, like, how do I, like, yes, I want to take on as much responsibility as I can to be a masterful communicator and to be diplomatic and not affect people's egos, and do all the things that you have to do as a CEO, right? But at what point should it actually not be your responsibility, and it should just be someone else's responsibility to wake up and learn how to treat others with respect? And I think this is an insidious issue in the startup community, because it is dominated by a very, very specific demographic, and it's very hard for diverse talent to succeed. And that's why it's even more important, which is why, like, recently I feel like I've decided I want to use my voice more. So thanks for the opportunity.
Good, you must.
Because we actually need the people that do have a diverse lens to make it. It's so important, and they're the ones that are probably the most likely to quit, because it is that much harder for them.
Mm-hmm. You literally just mentioned every single bucket of experience that I've gone through over the last, like, particularly in America, the sexual harassment, sexual assault, the manipulation, narcissistic boss with, triangulation, playing staff members off one another, isolating, people. I've experienced burnout. I've been trapped in workplaces because of visas, and then having bosses knowing they can hold that over me, and that I literally am not in a position to just go through that all over again, because with certain visas like the E3, you obviously, if you lose your job, you've only got 10 days to leave the country. Then you add, like, not just the entrepreneurial journey and all those layered experiences, but then you add the immigration piece on top of it, and you're somewhat powerless because you're not free. You don't have the resources. You don't have the same networks and support in this country. You can't just get up and go, well, F you, I'm out of here. You have to navigate things carefully, because you've got to apply for yet another visa and spend another $10,000 with potential months out of work with no pay, and go through all over. I mean, there's so many layers to it that are so stressful. And we'll talk about it offline, because I've got so many things to share with you. But I do talk to a lot of this stuff in my book, actually, the My American Dream, because it is a part of this pie in the sky vision that we all have often for America, which, again, America is and can be a great country in a lot of respects. But it does present a lot of challenges, Look, I could talk to you for hours. You are an incredible human being. I'm just so grateful that we were able to get connected. So I owe tremendous, gratitude to Stephen. I am definitely going to be calling you and staying in touch, and I'd love to do a follow-up interview and all that with you, because there's so many things that we haven't even talked to you about. I know that we've just approached an hour. We could talk to you for another 3, but I'm sure you have to get on with your day too, so we'll loop back. But I want to thank you so much for everything, and for everything that you've shared, and for showing up in all the capacities that you have. Like, the world needs you. So thank you.
Thank you, Georgie. It's been loved it.
So where can people find you? How can they stay in touch? All those things.
Most social platforms, really. If you want to check out the tech we're building, go to inTruth.io, and then my LinkedIn's just under my full name, and then Nick Gibson _ NIC Gibson _ on Instagram.
I will obviously share all of Nicole's links in the bio of the interview. Make sure, of course, that you subscribe, like, comment, share, all that jazz. And, of course, reach out to Nicole if you have questions and are curious about the future of her technology. And if you want to sign up to use it in beta and all the rest, just as I have, I'm really excited for that. So thank you again. Continue to stay unfiltered, Nicole. Continue to stay unfiltered, everybody. And here's to the future of humanity.
That's it.
Well, ciao for now, babe.
Hey.
Unfiltered. Like, in another world, like, you zone out. You know what I'm saying?